you guys, Jasmine out here in Singapore. Thank you so much for joining me on the Night Owl podcast. You guys, I have been working really hard to make sure that I cover all of my bases, that I make sure that even though I went wide instead of narrow for my content and the way that I teach, I am covering as many people as I can, because ultimately what I'm teaching is people to deal with their emotions. So that in a way, I guess, is niching down. But on the other hand, there are so many aspects to that. When you're dealing at work, when you're dealing at home, with your friends, with your family, with your children, with your spouse, with cousins, with relatives, with passers-by on the street, with other drivers on the road, there's so much to those emotions. So in a way, yes, I niched down. I'm talking about emotions. In another way, I kind of went really, really, really wide. So there's plenty for me to kind of define, and I feel like a lot of it comes down to trauma. A lot of it comes down to why you see the world the way that you do, the belief system you grew up with, if you've adopted new beliefs along the way, or if you're clinging tightly to what you were told as a child because it makes the most sense to you and you're afraid of letting go of what you know in order to embrace something that might fit you a little bit better. It's almost like giving up your favorite t-shirt for a brand new one because at first it's not going to fit you well, it's not washed in, it's not broken in, it's not, you haven't broken it in just right yet. So it's a lot like that. It's like giving up your favorite blanket or moving from your childhood home where you grew up all your life to a brand new city, brand new place. And it's scary at first until you make it your own, until you kind of break it in, right? So today I feel like I'm about to start some controversy because I have a lot to say. I feel like right now, if you were to spend your entire life with the mentality of my trauma fucked me up and that's why I am the way that I am, instead of learning how to heal and grow from your trauma, you become your own problem. And the reason I'm saying you become your own problem is because if you're always talking about the trauma, it means that you're reducing yourself constantly because your trauma has trigger words, it has trigger songs, it has trigger movies, it has trigger behavior, right? And every time you shrink away because there's a trigger or you avoid something because that was a trigger, tell me where you have space to actually live your life. Tell me where you have the ability to kind of embrace all of who you are and learn to move about the world. Instead, you're going to hide in a corner and avoid anything that triggers you because you don't want to feel that pain again. But what I'm asking you to do instead is accept, yes, okay, you've been through some trauma. You've been through something that is haunting you still. But until you deal with why it is that it's haunting you and understand that it was a occurrence in a specific time of your life by a specific person, that it's not the rule, it's actually the exception, you're going to continue belittling yourself and painting yourself into a corner. So I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. And this is why I became an EQ coach in the first place. I love emotional intelligence. I love the idea of gratitude and compassion. I think all of these are very, very important for motivation and mindset. But more than that, I want you to never have to fear having a conversation with somebody again. I don't want you to shy away from embracing love after you've been burned once. I don't want you to be afraid of starting new things because one time you started something new and it didn't work out very well. So I want you to carefully find a way to look at the things that hurt you before and understand why they hurt you and see what you could do to prevent that hurt once again. So it's almost like one time you were burned by fire, right? And if you are brave enough, you're going to look back at that incident and see, okay, well, what went wrong? How did I end up being burned? What can I do going forward to make sure that I don't get burned again? Obviously, you're going to stay away from fire, but maybe it was an electrical fire. Maybe you learned that, you can't have certain plug points overcrowded, or you can't have water near electricity, and you have to be very careful of the way you touch light switches or plug point, like any of those things. I'm not sure. I chose fire just, because I thought it would be convenient. Or maybe you had a near drowning accident, right? And maybe it was because you didn't know how to swim, so you could learn to swim to prevent that from happening again. Or you could learn to get back into the ocean and learn as much as you can about oceans and tides and riptides and currents and stuff, so you know what to expect and you can defend yourself or prevent anything from happening. Maybe it was a specific type of area that you went swimming. Maybe it was a rock pool or something and you slipped. So maybe going forward, if you ever go swimming again, which I hope you do, you'll find I know Vibram slippers that are kind of like, they grip all of your toes and feet and everything, and it becomes like second skin to you, and it gives you the ability to step on the rocks and not slip. You have a little bit more of a grip, right? So there are so many ways that you can prevent the same thing from happening if you just learn what it was that went wrong. For a lot of relationship, it comes down to communication. In my relationships, I had a tough time asking for what I wanted because I was afraid I was asking for too much. And that comes from my childhood, where we were not allowed to ask for anything because we weren't the only child. We had other kids in the family to consider, other people's needs to consider. We were always on the go. We didn't always have money. There was always some excuse for why I couldn't ask for what I wanted, or I was shut down immediately when I asked. A lot of times I don't ask anymore because I don't want to hear a no, right? So rather than hear no, I'm just not going to ask, which also means I avoid the opportunity for hearing a yes as well. The only questions that are stupid are the ones that go unasked. So I don't know if I don't ask. And it's been a big learning curve for me to learn to ask for what I want all over again. The other thing is telling people no. I feel guilty for telling people no sometimes because I feel like when they ask me, they had to muster up a lot of courage to ask me. I mean, that's what it was like for me, right? I have to muster up courage. So I assume that everybody's like me, and so that they have a tough time to ask. So when they ask, they really are in dire need. And so when I want to say no, I don't, because I'm afraid that I might be their last option. They have nowhere else to go if they're asking me, right? So I have that guilt complex that comes about. And it's something that came up from, when I was younger as well. Whenever I said no to my brothers or my mother, I was guilted into, oh, what, you can't do this for me? What, I'm not important enough to you? I'd have all of those comments. And so to avoid that kind of a response from anybody, I just say yes and I figure it out. I stretch myself thin and I try to people please because I don't want to hear the no. I don't want to hear the guilt that would come after, the shaming that would come after if I said no to somebody, and I'm afraid of losing people. So in my opinion, right? My trauma painted me into a corner for a long time because suddenly I have no choice but to people please. I have no choice but to say yes to everything people ask me. I have no choice but to help, even if I don't want to help them. If I don't feel like, they're asking from a genuine place, or I feel like they're using me, I don't have the courage or the fortitude or the sense of self to be able to say no and protect myself instead. So I've done all of this. And because I've done all of this and I've finally figured out that, you know what? There's so much more to life than just going along to get along. I am allowed to say no. And once I started saying no for simple things, like if somebody asks for an appointment that I don't have the time for, I can say no, but I can also give them an alternate date. I can also give them an alternate idea on how to do things, right? And that made me feel a lot better. So it wasn't a flat out no, and I wasn't disrespecting them. I wasn't cutting them off. I wasn't saying anything that they could take personally. I was just merely telling them that the schedule that they offered did not work for me, and I was going to offer them an alternate option. And that made me feel better. Eventually, drawing a line for boundaries became easier because I started with small things like, I don't feel comfortable with you touching me. And when I say that, people, yes, of course, get offended at first, but I explain to them, hey, it's because I've been abused before and I am afraid that I will, react out of fear and possibly hit you or brush you off. And that would be more offensive than if I warn you and say, hey, don't touch me because I don't feel comfortable, because this may be the reaction. And then I manage their expectations and I feel better about it. So for the most part, I realized how freeing it was to accept the trauma that I've been through, to understand that I am allowed to choose differently and to behave differently than I did back then, and that there is so much more to gain from standing up for myself, from communicating better and more effectively, from managing people's expectations of me so they don't assume that I'm going to do one thing and then get shocked and offended if I do something exactly the opposite. So for me, I feel like there was only so much time that I could go on talking about, oh my God, my trauma, my trauma, my trauma. Eventually I was like, yeah, but I'm not even living now because my trauma is my whole problem. I can't do anything because there are triggers everywhere. But I realized there was more freedom and more power in standing in the place that could trigger me and upset me and not being bothered by it. But how do I get there, right? I have to go back through the trauma. I have to go look at it. I have to figure out what it was that tripped me up, what it was that got me in trouble in the first place, right? In a position where I was powerless, where I was being taken advantage of, where I was being abused, shamed, any of those things. I need to figure out what it was that put me in that position and what I can control and change so that I don't end up in that position ever again. There were several times in college where I was almost raped, and I realized at the time that it was because I trusted the person and I did things on my own without telling somebody where I was. So if I were to ask for help or reach out for help, nobody knew where I was. Nobody was able to come rescue me, and I had kind of alienated myself in the hopes that this person was a genuine character. But eventually I realized that in order for me not to get caught in that situation again, I need to have people around me. I need to have people know where I am, right? And I need to know more about the person before I go blindly trusting people. So I do a little research now. I keep a small circle of friends around, and I make sure that I make my decisions from a more informed perspective, so I don't end up in those situations ever again. And even now, if I do, I know I can fight my way out of it. I know I could do some damage if I really tried, and that I'm allowed to fight back, that I'm allowed to put my hands on you if you're trying to do something that I'm not comfortable with, and I've told you and you're still not listening. So I'm okay with me now. I'm okay with stressful situations and crises at a moment's notice because I have gone back through and thought about what it was that landed me in the situation where I felt powerless in the first place, and I will do whatever I can to prevent it. Because I am not about to live my life in a small corner of the world just so I don't have to feel any pain anymore. I want to feel joy. And so that means I need to be vulnerable and open to whatever comes my way. And as it comes, I need to be ready to deal with it. So I hope this helps. I hope this makes sense. I'm not putting any of you down for the trauma that you've endured. Rather, I'm trying to explain to you that I've been through some stuff too. And I realized I was holding myself back from the world because I was afraid of feeling that pain again. But I had to teach myself that was a one-off. Not everyone is like that. Not every man out there is out to take advantage of you, and not every woman out there is manipulative. I need to learn that for myself, and the only way to learn and prove to myself that that was a one-off and not the rule is to put myself out there and let the world prove to me that there are different kinds of people. There are different kinds of relationships. There are different versions of communication. Some are better than others. But until you have the variety, you don't know what works for you and what you prefer. Does that make sense? So I hope this helped you guys. I hope it wasn't too in your face, but I do want you guys to understand. You have a choice in this life. You have more power than you acknowledged up to this point, and it's up to you to take your life back. It's up to you to find the courage to take your life back. Live on your terms, your way, your rules, nothing else, your preferences. Learn so much about yourself that if somebody comes along and they're actually interested to know who you are, you're able to teach them how to love you. You're able to teach them what you prefer and what you don't. You hear what I'm saying? So I hope this helps you guys. You got any questions, please drop them in the comments. And in the meantime, think about what I'm saying. I don't want you limited by your traumas. I want you out there thriving despite your traumas. You know? All right, you guys, I'll catch you later. Bye.